Here we are live. Fingers
Yay.
crossed this works.
Yes.
So, hi everyone. This is my first edition of I Want You to Win Too, which is a Substack community I'm putting together to really pass on and encourage others to share the knowledge that we have all learned over the years about what it takes to really become a bestseller or successful and fulfilled, most importantly, in whatever we do in our lives. And so for me today, I am so excited to share and share with all of you someone in my life who has really inspired me from day one as I became sort of known for my writing, for my thinking, learning from one of the really great minds of our times, which is Ijeoma, who is Ijeoma Oluo, a dear friend, the best-selling author of three incredible books and hundreds, if not thousands, of articles and hundreds of thousands of words. You know, inspiring us all to do better and be better. So, Ijeoma, thank you for joining us. Looks like others have joined us too, which is a surprise,
Yeah.
a delight. So if you do have questions, I'm actually going to toggle the live chat to questions only mode. So if you do have questions for Ijeoma, let's pop them in chat. But really, my first question for you, Ijeoma, thank you for joining us, is really how did you get into writing? Did you always know that this was going to be what you were going to do?
That's a great question. And it's always great chatting with you, Ruchika. I think I probably live closer to the life I thought I had as a kid than I did for a lot of my adult life. Writing was what I wanted to do from a very, very early age. And I grew up writing stories. It was something even in kindergarten, my mom has little bound stories that I would write and draw little pictures for. Writing has always been like my love, books, reading and writing. But it was definitely something by the time I got to like middle school, I was sure I wasn't going to do. We were incredibly poor. I didn't have a lot of role models of Black women making it in that space, especially for my age. And, there were a few, Maureen Hansberry, especially, I think, was like one of the first Black queer women that I saw, that had written. Of course, she was dead by the time I found her work, Toni Morrison, but it didn't seem really doable for me. And so I did what many Seattleites do, which is I got a job in tech early on. After I finished college, I got my degree in political science. But tech was a way to pay the bills and support my family. And I did not think I would be writing. I just had like a little casual blog that I honestly did like food reviews because I traveled a lot for work. And I found out that like if you write a review of a place, like you'll get free food, which was really great for me. I love that because I love food. And I did that for a while. And then I would occasionally kind of sneak in like my thoughts and opinions about the
Mhm.
world in there. But I was never trying to get, viewers or listeners.
Thank you. One quick question over
Mhm.
there. So you were like, it was literally like a blog spot or something
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Yeah.
literally like whatever you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
Very
I
good.
was not sharing. I think I had 50 subscribers. Like, I
Well,
was not trying to get readers. I wasn't trying to get anything for it. I was literally just it was a way to keep writing,
mhm.
and kind of write about my day, write about what was happening in my life, store kids' stories of my kids that were quite young at the time.
Mm.
And, but then around 2014 is when I started putting a little bit more about like my experience as a Black woman in there. Still, honestly, no intention of getting people to read it. I wasn't really actively sharing it, anything like that. Um, and then when Trayvon Martin was killed, I started writing a lot more, which was 2013, but that's around 2013, 2014. But I started writing more and more spaces. I started writing in like social media. But honestly, still, like my goal was just to get things off my chest and be heard.
Mm.
When I started writing, it was really from this place of desperation of people as an adult. People weren't talking about these issues, especially here in Seattle, where we live. And as a Black woman, going through these things, feeling like it's so desperate, and then having nobody talk about it around you, especially the way in which Seattle loves to posture itself as a very progressive area, to have people completely ignore the lived reality of someone right next to them, felt very gaslighting. And I remember, feeling like for my mental health, I had to get somebody to see this. And that's really kind of where it started picking up, and I started writing a lot more. And I still at that point did not think I was going to be a writer. I was just trying to kind of save my own life. I was really trying um, to not feel alone. I was really trying to be heard. I was really trying to get people to understand why, for the safety of everyone I loved dearly in my family, in my life, that we needed to be talking about racism in places like Seattle.
Mm.
And it started picking up, I think, because it was honest, because it was very much me trying to get people to see why this mattered. So I was using a lot of personal story. I was using a lot of comparison. I was, drawing in, I was kind of mixing genres at a time when I wasn't considering genre, and mixing this personal and the political, and having research and story to kind of help people see why this matters. And people started really being drawn to it. And at the same time, I was working in tech, and I was working in an incredibly white male space. I
Mm.
was the only woman in my department, and I was the only Black person in the building.
Oof.
And it was this, so I'm, writing honestly, openly in this one space, and then spending 10 hours a day in a space that's incredibly toxic, incredibly hostile. And I couldn't maintain both. And the more honest I was in this one space, the harder it was to like hold things in this other space. And I remember thinking, I'm going to get fired or I'm going to quit. It's going to be one or the other. And one day I just decided to leave, and I didn't have a backup plan, which is really unlike me. Um, I just gave my notice, and then I was like, let me see what I can do. And really started to build. And so you and I met within that first year.
Wow, in 2015
Yes.
when we
Yeah.
met. Oh.
Yeah. And so I had quit. I had no plan. Everyone was worried for me. People thought I might be going through something, like that I might be in mental health crisis. And I wasn't. It was just me actually really doing something for myself,
Mm.
which was as a caregiver, as a mother, I
Mhm.
so rarely did. I knew that I had what it took in one way or the other to make it, whether that was writing or not.
Mhm.
I knew how to support myself. I knew how to, do that. And so I started writing a ton. The writing articles for a living, especially in Seattle's cost of living, means you're writing a lot
Yeah.
of articles. And so people were suddenly seeing me everywhere, because I had to, if you're getting paid $200 an article
Yeah.
and you have a mortgage,
Yeah.
you got to write a lot of articles.
For real.
So I was pitching everywhere, 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 and I wasn't making it. I wasn't. I was not sure what I was going to do. And then when this opportunity to help start the establishment popped up, I jumped at it, because I knew, because the amount they were going to pay me was the exact amount of my mortgage.
Wow. Oh gosh. It's like there's this I hear this theme of like you took the leap because you were like, I can't hide away this part of me anymore.
Hmm.
Know what it's gonna look like. I'm gonna keep investing in the writing because that's what it is. And then like it's like this opportunity unfolded.
Absolutely. And I figured if I can get that and not lose our home, I can scramble for the rest. And that's what I did for those first couple of years was, I had the mortgage covered. And then if we needed to eat, I was going to write a bunch more articles, and I was going to
Yeah.
do all these other things. And because of that, because I had so much work out in the world, I really think that's what led to, my agent reaching out to me and asking if I wanted to write a book. And I signed my contract. When
I
I
remember
got,
when you told us that it was so
yeah,
exciting at the establishment. It was
it was.
we are making it.
And it saved my house. I paid 4 months of back mortgage with my advance,
Wow.
because that's how like struggling I was at the time. And I remember feeling that sense of such relief that like
Mm.
I was going to make it through the year, that it hadn't, that I had made it. And it kind of just went up from there. You know, that foundation of having so much work out there really helped set me up where I could start asking for better commissions. And then, of course, so you want to talk about race, ended up being a big success, which helped in a lot of ways. But yeah, that's really kind of the beginning. That's how that started.
A New York Times bestseller. That's not very there. Okay, so question for you. Did you, when you were writing these articles, did you always get to write about what you were interested in, or was it sort of a mix of like, I really like, I'm thinking of that amazing article you wrote where you interviewed Rachel Dolezal. These really inspiring, amazing pieces that kind of really shifted my mind, as well as, hundreds of thousands of other people's. Was there also like, I don't know, like, I'm thinking of like, one place that paid really well is I did a lot of like content writing where I'd like write about like random stuff for like a car blog or whatever it is, really to pay
Mhm.
the bills. I was wondering if you also kind of had that.
No, luckily when it came to, I think, being established really early as an opinion writer, it meant that I didn't have to take on a lot of things I didn't want to. And in fact, I learned so much from the things I didn't want to do,
Mm,
because there were so many times where, as a Black woman opinion writer, you get pigeonholed really fast.
very
And editors would reach out to me and they would just want another version of something I already wrote.
good.
They would literally send me a link to an article I wrote and say,
Mm,
"Can you write this for us?" And in that frustration, it helped me pinpoint um, like what I didn't want to write, but also how we continued to talk around things instead of addressing core issues.
mm,
And everyone wanted a new version of a commentary on a new racist thing instead of conversation about the underlying patterns. And so that's kind of actually where I started to really find my niche, and a lot of my bigger pieces came from. Sometimes it would come from an editor saying, "Could you write this for me?" And me saying, "I don't want to. This is why." And an editor saying, "Okay, could you write that?"
mm,
And it created this space for me to be able to talk about things other people weren't. The Rachel Dolezal piece is hilarious, because I absolutely didn't want to write that. But not in the slightest. I remember I had when, if it weren't for Charles, it would not have happened. Charles Mudede was a very trusted editor that I worked with at The Stranger for years. And he loved to torture me. He loved to, when I did film reviews, he loved to send me to films he knew I hate, because he thought it was hilarious when I would write about how much I didn't like something. And um, when I had this moment where he was trying to call me, and Rachel Dolezal had hit the news again because she had changed her name. And she had happened to change her name to the same name as my sister, one of my sisters, which was
oh,
really like
yeah.
eerie. And I was so ready to be done with her. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Now you've taken my sister's name. That's cool. And I kept getting calls from Charles, and I was at an event. And I didn't know. And suddenly I just had this thing where I'm like, oh, this asshole's going to ask me to write about Rachel Dolezal. I just knew it, and I didn't want to answer the phone, and I waited till the next day. I finally answered, and I'm like, "What?" And he was in a very Charles way. "We can do this, Ijeoma. We could do this." And I'm like, "No." And he was like, "Just meet with me, talk with me. We can do this." And I meet him for coffee, and he's holding her book, and he's like, hands it to me, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to do this." And he was like, "I just think we can do this. I think that we can write about this in a way that like does some
Mm,
good, that refocuses, that makes it so that you're not having to deal with the specter of Rachel Dolezal in pop culture all the time." And I decided to trust him, but I was so anxious. I didn't want to, I was having panic attacks the whole day before. I was like, what if I got sick? What if I broke my leg? What if I like fell on the way and then I couldn't go and I couldn't do this? Then I wouldn't have to. And, um, I had to I had to lean into my preparedness and be as prepared as absolutely possible for that. It was not a fun experience. Sitting in someone's home who despises you for 8 hours
oh,
is not a fun time. And but working with Charles, writing that piece, it stretched me creatively so much. It was absolutely the biggest article of my career. It was the biggest article of The Stranger's history. It broke the website. Um, But then after that, everyone wanted me to interview every other awful human being. And
Mm.
I was like, please don't. I think I've done my part. I think I've made my contribution.
Yeah.
But that was one of the few times where I said yes to something I really didn't want to do, but it was only because of how much I trusted the editor. And, he was right. It was a really important piece. Yeah.
That's great advice. I think the kind of nuggets I'm taking away is obviously the importance of having a really trusted editor, which I think becomes even more necessary as you think about books. And I think I'd love to, we'll talk about sort of your author career as well. But I think sometimes there's this thought that like, oh, I should just jump into any opportunity. But the reality is like you also have to think about your own mental health and your own sort of sense of being while you're doing this thing, right? And I remember in journalism school a lot of it was like, oh, it's okay, like and journalism school is very much geared towards, and journalism itself is geared towards these like white men. It's like you can sit in front of like, I don't know, a Jeffrey Epstein and whatever it is, like you can be
Hmm.
neutral in that situation, and it doesn't at all account for what it means if you're a woman, a black woman, a woman of color, queer woman. What does that mean when you sit in front of someone who despises you, right? And how do you really get the story out then? So yeah, thank you. And I hear the importance also of like you do one or you do however many, and then you're like, no, I'm not doing anymore. Like I think that is one of the challenges we anyway face because of that pigeonholing. Like, oh, you're writing about black women, like just continue writing about that forever, right? Or only about racism, but in a very narrow way, rather than saying like, okay, let's how do we reinvent and make sure that we're not pigeonholed, I think is
Hmm.
the other part that I'm hearing. Okay, so you had, and it sounds like we both had, which I didn't know this about you, but so your agent reached out to you rather than you querying your literary agent. Tell me a little bit about like how you decided to like go ahead with being represented, how you decided to write a book, how did So You Want to Talk About Race sort of come about?
Hmm. Well, one thing I'll say too, when it comes to getting an agent, I was so fortunate in that my sister-in-law, Lindy West, had already come out with a book earlier. And so when I talked to her about, maybe what next steps I should take professionally, one thing she told me was make sure you have a website for your work. Make sure you have a website that has links to your work and it has a way for people to reach you professionally. And she said, as you're building your thing, people want to know how to contact you. It's
Mm,
not for fans. Fans don't usually spend a lot of time on your website, but editors will want to know how to reach you. Agents will want to know how to reach you. And they're going to, if they see one article they like and they want to learn more, don't make them Google you. Put the best of what you have, what you like the most on one space. And so I just had a very simple website that just had a list of links to like my favorite pieces I'd written, how
mm,
to reach me. And that's where my agent got in contact with me, honestly, within a few months of creating that. And it's also where I got so many offers for speaking, so many offers for writing. And so, I recommend that people really make it easy for people to find you if you want to have an agent, even if you're querying, having a central place so that people, when they're looking you up, they're not going through, because they might find one of your duds. They might find one of your earlier pieces and not the pieces you're most proud of, or they might not find pieces that show your breadth of what you could do. And so I did that, and that really helped. Lauren reached out to me early and was very much, I mean, I think in 2015, she actually reached out to me
mm,
and was, had asked, have you, she was clearly a fan. She had clearly been reading my work, had been keeping up on it, and asked if I had considered writing a book. And I said no, because at that point I really hadn't. I do have ADHD, and honestly, the thought of a book seemed really impossible for me, seemed incredibly overwhelming. I already struggle with things like deadlines, and I was like, how would I possibly
mm, mm,
do this?
mm.
And she talked about why she thought I should consider it, what space she thought my books could live in and what benefit it would have to readers. And part of what I loved about listening to Lauren was, in talking with her, it was very clear that she was very familiar with my work. She
Mm.
wasn't just talking about what she could sell. She approached me with why a book could matter and what difference that could make to my readers. And that sat with me for a while. I hadn't considered it in that sense. I was just considering the overall load of it and thinking, I don't want to write more about this. It just seemed, and realizing like, when she addressed a lot of my frustrations, which was having to repeat myself over and over again, feeling like I was writing the same article. And
Mm,
she talked about the difference that a book makes, that when people have a thing they can hold and go back to over and over again, you don't have to repeat yourself. You can point to this thing and say, it exists. And I thought about it for a few months and then I went back and said, okay. And then it took me probably over a year to do my proposal because it just seemed overwhelming. The thought of writing basically a small book about the book you want to write.
mm.
And, she gave me plenty of guidance. Um, but I had to wait till I was ready. And I was also just working so much. Like we were working so hard at the establishment. I was
Right.
writing so much and finding the time, especially because I was a single parent of two
Yeah.
kids,
It's-
was really hard. And she was so patient. She never bothered me about it.
yeah.
Just was like, whenever you're ready, we'll be ready. And we were able to get it out there. And, before deciding with Lauren, I did do my research. So I reached out to anyone I knew who was agented. I asked if I could get their agent's opinion on Lauren and on her agency.
Interesting.
And I really wanted to get industry perspective,
Mm,
and I heard nothing but great things about the overall reputation of the whole agency and about Lauren. And then looking at her client base, I saw myself in it. She represented so many Black women, so many women of color, so many people who wrote similar things to me, but also different things. And it felt like I could grow my career as well. And so I decided to go with her. And I'm so lucky. I will say there's no one I trust in this industry the way that I trust her. It used to be your editor was your relationship you kept. And now with the amount of mergers, and I don't know anyone who gets to keep the same editor more than one book these days. So, many of us have our editors switched out on us halfway through a book,
yeah.
which has happened to me. It's happened to my sister-in-law. It's happened to a lot of people I know. But your agent, the person that's going to guide you through all of these changes, it is absolutely the most important relationship you could have. And I'm so fortunate that I have, I think, to me, the best in the business when it comes to that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing this. One of the things I get asked a lot is like, "Oh, like, what's your advice for getting an agent?" I am hoping to have my agent. She was like, I'm much better behind the scenes than in front of the camera, but hopefully she
Mhm.
will join us in this series at some point too, Miley Beal. But one of the questions I get asked a lot from writers is like, how did you query your agent? I had a similar experience where, Miley reached out to me after reading my articles, but I think the advice on like having a body of work that can easily be found. There's a little bit of back and forth on like how much of a social media presence do you need to have? Like, do you need to have hundreds of thousands of like followers, millions of followers to get a book deal? And yes, we have seen that sort of more that model work as well. But I'm starting to see a lot of people with a small engaged audience, but enough of a body of work that you can understand like here's what they write about or here's what their thoughts are. Would you sort of agree? What have you seen?
Absolutely. And when I mean, I will say the pressure to have a social media engagement is higher now than it used to be.
Mm,
But I had a very small following. Most people had no idea who I was when I first started. I had a few thousand Twitter followers, I think like maybe 10,000, and a few thousand Instagram. I was barely on Instagram.
mm,
Um, and that was it. It was my body of work. It was really about people seeing my byline in places.
mm,
One thing that I knew when I started writing was I knew that even though I have an incredibly common name, that I know so many other Ijeomas, and Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, and Ijeoma being one of the popular names, it's like a Sarah, like people know. Um, I knew that here in the States, so many people struggle with my name, and I knew that people were not necessarily going to remember my name. They weren't going to type it in and look for it. I wanted them to remember my voice and the consistency of my voice, of everything sounding like me and not letting anyone pull me away from that. I needed people to want to look for me. I wanted people to start reading and go, "Oh, I think this is that author," because I knew that's all I had. I didn't have like that clicky name. I didn't have that massive profile. I didn't have these things that would draw people in. It had to be that everyone knew what to expect when they were reading one of my articles, or that they would start reading one and immediately know it was mine. And that meant that I protected it the way that so many people protect like the brand they're building. Like this was my version of brand, was my voice, my writing style, my integrity. And it meant that I was very picky. I said no to a lot of things. And I really narrowed my process down of being true to my voice. And I think that is what it was when my agent reached out to me talking about, she was so clear about what it was about my style that was unique. And I think that was also something that was easier for her to market when it was time for me to start shopping this, proposal around and find the right publisher. And so it doesn't have to be you when we talk about your brand, it does not have to be a social media presence at all. It can be a shortcut, especially honestly, I will say, for lazy editors who want a quick buck. And they're like, oh, I can, because what they're thinking then is I can quickly get this audience. And they'll often sign people without even knowing if they can write.
Yeah.
um, by having the consistency of work where you have a readership that actually would follow you to a book
Yeah.
and read it and share it, is, I think, far more valuable.
Yeah. And I love that. I think that for me is a very important learning in all the books I've written, right? The importance of like, who is your core audience? Who's going to follow you through? And it's often not people on social media. It's very often not entirely your entire social media presence are going to buy your book, right? And I think that's really important to nurture like a core audience. Okay, so how do you choose what to write about, both in terms of articles and then certainly how did like, so you want to talk about race, then maybe generate mediocre and then generate be a revolution in some way?
Yeah. When it came to articles, like when we were at the establishment, right, you have this kind of expectation, right? There's a certain amount of articles that have to go out.
Mhm.
And when you're paying your bills article by article, like you have to come up with ideas. It really becomes a job. I've actually like taught classes on how to like capture
Mhm.
ideas and keep them, but
Mhm.
I always had to have something to record ideas as they came. I think a lot of times we expect inspiration to hit us when we sit down to write, and that's not, when that happens, beautiful. But if you wait for that, you're not paying your bills writing, because it will not happen enough. Everywhere, if you're at the grocery store and you're thinking about how you want to talk to someone about this particular thing that's happening in the world, write that down, because that can be a piece. And there were so many times I had this long list of random thoughts that might be a piece. And there were so many times at the establishment where we were like, hey, we need one more article. And I would go through the list and be like, oh, I think I can do this.
Yep.
Right. And often that's what that was. And then there were times, because I was an opinion writer, where you're absolutely jumping on what's in the news right now, trying to get that piece out as soon as possible. And for me, what I always looked for as an opinion writer was what isn't being said, what's being said in the wrong way, or in a way that's misleading to people, what is getting in the way of people's understanding of these issues. I
Mhm.
always wanted my work to have value, unique value in the reading space. I didn't want people to just read a rehashing of what was happening in race and gender in America. I wanted people to talk about it differently. And I think that's also part of how we ended up with So You Want to Talk About Race, was because so much of my work was born out of frustration over what we weren't talking about, or how we were talking around things, and how unproductive these conversations we were having could
Mhm.
be. And so when part of this was in conversation with me and Lauren, and she was talking about how, she really felt that my particular space was getting people to look at things they talked about so much in a new light, and really get breaking through where other writers couldn't. And so I sat down and thought, well, what are the top beef? What do I have the most beef with, of people not getting when we're talking about race? And then I also brought in a lot of people. So I asked a whole bunch of people of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, like, what are your pet peeves? What are the things that you wish people would ask more? What do you wish they would ask less? What do you wish they would ask in a different way? And I was able then to kind of coalesce around these core
Mhm.
questions that I was able to build that book for. And I really wanted it to be a book. I envision, and I hope everyone does this for pieces they write. Envision what your reader is doing with it. envision where they're going to access it, how, even if you're writing fiction, like where are they going to sit and read it? What mood, what space are they going to be in? But especially for nonfiction, I had to think, how do I envision people using it? So I envisioned people using this in a classroom. I envisioned someone at home having a particular issue, going to a chapter, being able to pick it up, read that chapter, get some
Mhm.
kind of better understanding, feel more confident, and then go and have that conversation. And so that's really how I wrote it. And that's how it ended up being used, which is why I think it was so widely applicable of a book. And I really recommend that for people because I think we can write and write and write about these subjects we're passionate about, and we're doing that for us, but we don't think about the utility of what we're writing and what that means to the readers and what it could mean if we are more thoughtful about how we approach it.
I love that. And so then as you know, So You Want to Talk About Race comes out, it's really well received. It's a really important book. I've applied it in my classrooms when I've taught at Seattle University and University of Washington. I wonder, from there, like how did the sort of idea of mediocre come about? How did you talk about it to Lauren and,
Mhm.
decide that this is going to be my next book?
Mediocre is my favorite, by the way. I have to say that. They're not children; they can't hear me say it, but I mediocre is my favorite. And like it's the one if I was to pick up a book and sit and read it myself, like that would be the one.
Mhm.
That one came to me actually at a writing retreat. We were, I was at Hedgebrook, and it was right at the time that some accusations of sexual impropriety and coercion had come out around a popular male author. And I was struck by how much in this women's writing retreat we were all talking about this man and the impact that he had on us. And I was seeing it over and over and over again. And in my head, I was seeing generation after generation of conversations. And I was seeing this whole time as we were talking about it, I kept thinking about all of the women manipulated by this person who stopped writing altogether. And instead of thinking about the grief of this man and like not being able to pedestal him anymore, I was thinking about all these women who never got to be in this space because of these abuses and because of how we prioritize men so far above women. And I started thinking about that in a more historical sense and what the overall cost had been um, in general. And so, right then, as we were having wine for dinner, talking about this, and I was thinking about like how brilliant so many of these women could have been, and we won't know that it just came to me. And Hedgebrook had no internet. It's famous for not having any internet connection. You can go in this little pump room and use a computer. Otherwise, you're kind of up in the woods. And so it's very spotty cell phone. So I wrote it on a piece of paper. I didn't have pockets. I stuck it in my bra. And then I walked out until like to the road where I could get internet. And I just texted this sentence because I didn't want to forget to my agent. And I said, this is what I want to write about. And then I went back and finished my residency. And when I came back, she was like, yeah, this sounds amazing. Let's go for it. And that's really where it started.
Yeah, I love that book, and I have to say, it's so remarkably ahead of its time, right? It absolutely captures this time in history we're living through really, really well, and I wish we would learn, but clearly we don't. Another topic, lots of wine, another time. Okay. All right. So I know, we're kind of coming up to the last, 5 to 10 minutes of our time together. So what I wanted to really ask you is like how in this really, this time that we're living in, especially with this, I have to bring up AI, I do, in this time of like AI really changing how we use the internet, how many people use the internet, how we get information, how we put out our voice and how our voices are represented. I'm wondering if there's any advice or practices or your thoughts on how you're navigating this time where really everyone's like, oh, AI is gonna like disrupt all writers. We may not even need your voice anymore.
Yeah, I am not exceptionally concerned about AI. And I'm not saying that because AI isn't something to be concerned with. I'm concerned with labor. And AI is at its core a labor issue.
Mm,
And so I consider it a part of all of the work that I try to do around labor, around capitalism.
mm,
If we had labor protections, and there's a reason why studies show that people in the US are far more distrustful of AI
yeah,
and report much more negative experiences than other countries, because countries that have labor protections are protected from this sort of exploitation. This is all about the exploitation of workers. It is not new. It's just
mm,
another tool, right? And any tool that hyper capitalist entities have, they're going to use if they can do something to devalue laborers and keep their profits and keep control. And as a writer, we are creators. We are also laborers when we are creating products that interact with these larger systems. As someone who has to work with a publisher and all these other things, right? We are the core labor force for
mm,
this, and recognizing that writers are incredibly unprotected in the U.S. because we do not have union. If you work at a paper that has a union, you might be a little more protected, but these unions have been weakened so much over time. It's about labor for me, and so my focus is not, do we get rid of AI, because big business will come up with something else.
mhm,
It's, how do we strengthen labor, and how do we, as a labor force, as a writing force, as a creative force, how do we strengthen each other and protect each other? So
mm,
right now, what I'm seeing that worries me more than anything is just the absolute decimation of Black women from the writing
mm,
spaces. How many Black women who had the only, who had were lucky enough to get some secure jobs,
mm,
staff positions, have all been laid off.
yeah,
Look at the Washington Post, where,
yeah,
like, it's so, Washington Post used to be, they were so desperate for Black Twitter. They were so desperate for every Black woman's
yeah,
voice.
yeah,
And the way in which they have decimated their Black women staff.
yes,
And we're seeing this across the board. And it also affects those of us who write books. No one covers our books now. Black women were the consistent people looking out for Black women and women of color, making sure people knew our work existed. They're
yes,
not there anymore. And everyone that I've talked to, every Black woman, everyone of color I've talked to who's had a book come out in the last 2 years has talked about this particular experience.
yeah,
So for me, it's reminding me that, like, part of why people were looking for us is what we built outside of this system, and the way in which we were upping each other's work, we were caring for each other. There was a time when we were completely outside of the system, and we
yes,
knew we had to work together, support each other to get our work out there. We had to bring other people with us as we crossed over, thresholds. And then we were sought after, and people stopped doing that. And people started looking out only for themselves and thinking they were cushy, and thought that had a traditional path open to them. That was never the case. We were given a temporary window into a system not built for us, and we're back where we were. And that is not scary to me. That's
mm,
not scary to me, because we did this before. We know how to do this. I know how to do this way better than I know how to navigate being on the inside. I know how to navigate being outside of it. So that's what I'm kind of leaning into right now. And I recommend that every writer do. If you are a writer from a marginalized community, I'd say, especially if you're a Black woman, you will not have a career worth having if you don't have friends, if you don't have community, if people can't remember a time where you helped them out, where you had their back, if you're not collaborating with people. And that has been what I have been leaning into. That has what has carried me through lean times. And writers will always have lean times. It
mm,
is a very cyclical work. These are some of the hardest years I've had professionally in a long time. And the only reason why I'm still here is because I am just leading so hard into what I know about Black women, what I know about other women writers of color, and what we can do together. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm spending so much time trying to think about how we work together, how we support each other. And I'm back to my grind of, like, write, 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 but
yeah,
writing just to know that my work deserves to be in the world, regardless of who wants to put it out there.
yeah,
And we can make it through, and we will, because we have unique, authentic voices
yeah,
in a world that's oversaturated with AI slop. I believe authenticity shines more than ever. more than ever. People will see a real true piece and be like, oh my God, why does this feel so different? Why am I getting so much out of this? Because they're so used to reading crap. And I do not think that this means the death of the writer, but I do think it points out what we have always needed, which is to protect our labor, to protect each
Mhm.
other, and to never think that any of these big business, because publishing is a big business, is
Yes.
never actually going to have our best interests at heart. And we will never arrive at a
Yeah.
place where we don't have to work like this. It's just part of the work. So make it part of the joy, make it part of the community you build, part of the support system that holds you through it.
Yeah. Gosh, I needed it so badly. Thank you. Because it has been rough out here. I want to be really honest to everyone here,
Mhm.
whether you're early career, whether you've had an established writing career, whether writing is sort of your side project and passion, whether it's your full-time, whatever your relationship to it is, if you're listening today, it's, this is really the toughest time that I have personally navigated. And I'm hearing this from a lot of writers. So the reminder is like, we really have to build together because otherwise, yes, it is really tough and lonely. Okay, last question. If you could go back to yourself as an early writer, Ijeoma, before even so you want to talk about race, what's some advice you would give to that version?
You know, I would say the one thing that I've learned over and over and over again is there will be a little voice in your head that will tell you, don't write that thing or don't let that go out the way it is. Listen to it and don't let anyone talk you out of it. The only pieces I've regretted having out in the world were times where there would be outside intervention telling me I needed to change a particular aspect and I went with it. And I regret all of those things to this day. I can pick every little piece, every little line that didn't sit right with me that I changed in order to appease someone. And that was so important. And then I would say always remembering if you have big times, if you're a working writer, the ability to just get by and keep writing and keep creating a body of work is an immense privilege. And do not let big times talk you out of that. Um, when I was first starting, I think I wish I could have known this is it. This is the immense privilege. I get to create, I get to do something where I see the immediate value of it in my life. I get to do a thing that fulfills me. And even if I'm struggling, like that's it. That's the thing that so many people dream of, that so many people, say one day, one day, one day. If you get it in any sense, you're there, you've arrived. And what can happen is as things get bigger, and I have absolutely been in these big spaces,
Mm.
that becomes it. And that's not it at all. That is a temporary thing. That is a thing that does not carry you. That is not a thing that brings you joy. And if you, and there's so many times where I wish I had understood early, like when we were at the establishment and we were just writing, 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 that I was there, I was in it. I was in it, and I was in a space where I was encouraging and helping other writers get their first pieces published. We
Yes.
were experimenting. We were doing all of these things. If I had known that was it, like that, I think could have like made me feel so much more confident as my career was moving and changing and rising. I would have had that core sense of like when I was still doing the work I needed to do. Because as my work grew, I absolutely started feeling more and more unsatisfied with it
Mm.
because I wasn't able to connect with those core things anymore. Everything became about numbers and all of that. But I know so many writers who are starting out thinking, they'll call me and say, how will I know if I have a successful book? What are the numbers of sales that would make it successful? And they forget that they're actually there, right there. Because none of that is, you can't touch that. You have nothing to do. You have so little to do with whether or not your book is a success.
Mm.
You're there, you're doing it, you're creating, you're doing a thing that people spend their whole life dreaming they can do. You're there. That's it. And that's the thing I wish I could have just like spent more time in those earlier days, just recognizing I was in that really free space where I
Mm.
could experiment. I just the other day, I wrote about this. Someone had brought up a really old article I wrote saying that they brought it up, it made them laugh. And it was when I used to do film reviews. And I
Oh,
started pulling up my old articles, and I was just weird. And it was so fun to see me absolutely throwing spaghetti at the wall, and just being like, let me try this. And I can remember giggling hysterically as I was writing these things. And you can see it on the page. And if I had known that that wild experimentation was the most joyous time I was going to have in writing, I think I would have protected that and nurtured that so much more. And so these times where you feel like no one might be reading your work, experiment, go wild, have fun, because there will be a time eventually where you will feel more pressure to write in a particular way, where your voice will be defined in this particular way, where there will be, these expectations on you, and you won't have the freedom to do all those wild things. So cherish it, cherish every step of it. Your lean years are like, about how you pay your bills. They're not actually about the work that you come out. Those are often the richest years that you can possibly have in a creative career.
yeah. I love this. This is incredible advice, as I knew it would be. Thank you so much for your time, Ijeoma. This is, I think that remembering and so much of what you said about this being it is, for me, this is part of it. Like, how do I pay back, right? Like, I've had these incredibly rich years for now being followed by many lean years, it
Mhm.
seems. But for me, it's like reminding both myself and others, no matter where they are in terms of their writing and their speaking and other careers, that like, we really do have each other. We have a lot to learn from each other as well. And it's important for me to want to support that too. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you to the audience who joined us. I know they're
Mhm.
your audience. I didn't tell anybody I was doing this. So
Mhm.
thank you so much to everyone. And Ijoma, take care. I'll see you
Thank
soon.
you. So good to talk with you.
Good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.